It's My Nerd World and a Star Wars show. On this week's episode, the Game of Thrones creators may be a little bit upset about how they exited the Star Wars galaxy. Ewan McGregor discusses the future, or what may not be the future, depending on your point of view, of a second season of the Kenobi show. Is blue milk coming to a grocery store near you? I'll share my latest thoughts on the Bad Batch Season 3 and a bonus for this week's episode. I went out and saw Godzilla x Kong, and I'll share with you my thoughts in a review on this week's Star Wars show episode. If you want to support My Nerd World and a Star Wars show, go download the Underdog Fantasy app. And listen, I am a complete novice when it comes to fantasy sports, but Underdog Fantasy is a fan-favorite way to play fantasy sports, and I found some added entertainment value. And seriously, I'm a total novice, and I'm winning big playing the Pick'em game with Underdog Fantasy, watching my NASCAR races over the weekend. Go download their easy-to-use app, or go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use my radio show promo code TCNT, and they're going to match up to $100 of your first deposit of $10. You'll get matched by just going and downloading the app and using the promo code TCNT. Now, listen, I'll give you more details on this coming up later on in the show, but seriously, I don't do fantasy sports, and I've been doing spectacular using Underdog Fantasy with my weekend NASCAR races. So more details a little bit later on, but head on over, download the app, or go to UnderdogFantasy.com and use that promo code TCNT. Now, let's get to this week's show.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of the My Nerd World, a Star Wars show. As always, if you want to email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. We have some listener feedback emails to share towards the end of today's show. Let's dive into some of the news this week. It's kind of a hodgepodge of different Star Wars-related items that we can discuss on this week's show.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So the Game of Thrones creators were announced several years ago, and I can't believe it's actually been several years ago, but they were announced several years ago to be working on a project for Lucasfilm, creating a series of Star Wars films. And just as quickly as the Game of Thrones creators of Benioff and Weiss came in, they seemed to exit, going over to Netflix for a massive sum of money. They've been doing the podcast circuit, promoting their show, The Three Body Problem. I'll share my thoughts on the Three Body Problem here in just a moment, as I've watched all of Season 1. But Benioff and Weiss went on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. And on that podcast, the host grilled them about their exit from Lucasfilm and Star Wars, and specifically asked Benioff and Weiss if they were at all upset with the fact that it looked like Lucasfilm was moving forward with their original idea. Now, this would be the James Mangold announced origin, Dawn of the Jedi origin film. Way back when Benioff and Weiss were said to be writing a Star Wars film, it was widely reported that they would be doing a early Inception, Dawn of the Jedi type story. Everybody kind of forgot about that. They went off to go do their series over on Netflix, and years later, we get this announcement last year that James Mangold of Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones fame, Ford versus Ferrari, that he was going to be directing this Dawn of the Jedi film, working title, not what the official title of the film would be. This would be the origin story. I think he described it as the Ten Commandments, or was it Ben-Hur? I can't remember. It was one of those, just to be this epic Star Wars film telling the origin story of where the Jedi came from. Well, while they were making the rounds on these talk shows on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Benioff and Weiss seemed to be somewhat taken aback that the host of the show was asking them this question and gave a rather diplomatic yet muted response of, hey, we wish them all the best in what they plan on doing with the show, and then moved off from the question. It was a very awkward moment. And it, again, underscores the tensions for creators who sign on with Star Wars and then are unceremoniously, sort of booted from different projects or quit different projects. And it's the world that we live in right now when it comes to reporting that's done and how much information we as fans are actually privy to. But it appears as if Benioff and Weiss may have presented Lucasfilm with this idea to create a Jedi origin story, but then Lucasfilm decided to keep it. And I'm sure that contractual obligations in early conversations, even if they are handshake agreements, mean that if you present this idea that they can eventually go and do it, or the ownership of the story in something like The Dawn of the Jedi wouldn't necessarily leave with Benioff and Weiss when they went to go do a different project. I still question whether or not this Dawn of the Jedi film ever gets made. Right now, all we know for sure is that the Mandalorian and Grogu film is apparently going into production within the next few months, and that is the first movie slated for release, and I believe we're looking at a 2026 release date for that film, so we're still a couple of years away. Now, before I move on to the next news item, I did watch all of Three Body Problem. Now, I was familiar with the Three Body Problem property from the promotion of my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. Often when I go to promote my books, I'll go and take a look at the Hot 100 in the space opera genre category. And these books, and it's a trilogy of them, Three Body Problem, typically are in the Hot 100 of the space opera category. Now, I would not label Three Body Problem as being a space opera series by any stretch. It's a rather interesting concept of having first contact with an alien species. This alien species is heading towards Earth, but will not be arriving for some 400 years. And the ramifications of what that has on Earth. Now, there's a lot more to the story in and of itself. There is a bit of Ready Player One sort of gameplay taking on, where the alien species goes and hands technology to those that are directly involved in the knowledge of this alien race heading towards Earth. It is a character study. There's a lot of different characters involved that are all a part of this larger story taking place. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. It was nice to see a show that was, how do I want to put it? Wasn't incredibly explicit, apart from the fact that apparently now everybody in the world just drops F-bombs all the time. Unfortunately, you kind of become immune to it when you watch these shows, but I'll tell you that going into it, Melinda and I typically have this how many F-bombs are we going to get before we pitch off of this show? And it usually ends up being a combination of that and explicit material. Thankfully, it seems as the show went on, you heard less and less of it unless we just became immune to it. That's my only real complaint when it comes to the quality of the show. The making of the show was good. The effects were good. The storytelling was good. It was unique. It bills itself as being something very highbrow in terms of its scientific content and the storytelling. But ultimately, it's just a different retelling of what will eventually be an alien invasion film. The first season of the series, available on Netflix right now, has a bit of a solid ending, but certainly leaves it open to other seasons that'll cover the rest of the books, I assume. I believe that season 1 covers the first book, and then season 2 and 3 will cover the next two. Although, to be honest, I haven't gone and actually looked to see if we did cover all of book 1. In terms of the finale of the show, that's my guess. If you like science fiction and you can handle a certain level of language, I would definitely go and check it out. There's nothing else explicit in it beyond that. And we enjoyed it as a family. It's incredibly compelling. The first 5 episodes are really awesome. As a matter of fact, you can almost, end on the 5th episode and could have been a finale, even though there's certainly more story to tell. I think overall, if I was doing like a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the best, I'd probably give it about a 7. If it hadn't been for all the language, I probably would have given the series an 8 or an 8.5. It was certainly unique. But again, you kind of go into it thinking it's going to be this really sort of, highbrows, pinkies up story. And when you come to really get down to it, no, it's kind of just your typical science fiction fare. That being said, I like me some science fiction. Wish there weren't so many F-bombs in it. Otherwise, it was an enjoyable watch.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right, we'll move through these other items quickly. This one's not all that surprising, but Ewan McGregor was making the rounds recently in interviews and says that at the moment, there is no plans for an Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2. And listen, I'm glad there's no plans for an Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2. I was disappointed with the Kenobi series. I personally don't think that it really added anything to the overall mythology. If anything, it complicated the mythology more and I can't believe I'm saying this, but even diminished a bit of the canonical storytelling that we already had in the films. There are moments in it that I enjoyed, but overall, I just thought the production was weak. The storytelling was rather weak, and this is typically an argument that I don't usually do, but in this case, I think it warrants it. It was a kind of an unnecessary fights between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. I would have been better off just not even having the story and leaving it be that we saw them fight in Revenge of the Sith, and then when we see them in A New Hope, these are two individuals who have certainly slowed down in their older age, which would explain why the fight isn't nearly as dynamic as it was before, and you have to now jump through some mental hoops to explain the way the dialogue plays out in the original trilogy based off what happened in the Kenobi series. So this massive Star Wars fan is not disappointed whatsoever that we're not getting, at the moment, another Kenobi series. I want Lucasfilm to be focusing on the theatrical releases. And let me add another news element to this as well. The Acolyte is the next live-action series that we're getting. I've been talking about that the past few episodes, and I've got my concerns over this show, as I've mentioned, and now those concerns are growing because word is that the episodes are only going to be some 20 minutes to a half hour, and we're only going to get about 8 episodes. And I don't know if this is well, let me reword that. My gut is that the research is telling these content creators that this is what the audience wants, that they want these half-hour, 30-minute stories for their live-action streaming shows. And for me, I don't know how you get that depth of storytelling to kind of get it off the ground within that period of time. I know when The Acolyte drops on June 4th, we're going to be getting 2 episodes back-to-back, much in the same way that we did with Ahsoka. And I imagine it's because of the very thing that I'm mentioning right now, that if they just dropped 1 episode, they probably couldn't get into the meat of the story. And considering the fact that we are venturing into a part of the Star Wars timeline that we have never visited before, 100 years in live action prior to the events of The Phantom Menace, and we're only going to be given these short episodes, essentially what will amount to, I believe, 4 hours in total. It makes me kind of rather that they had just gone the route of, either making fewer episodes and making them an hour long or making 2 2-hour films. Listen, I'll watch it. I'll judge it when I see it and whether or not my concerns are valid once we get there, but I'm kind of scratching my head as to why we're keeping it this short. I thought Ahsoka did a very good job in terms of the pacing of the storytelling. Those were running 38 minutes to 40 minutes, if not a little bit longer, and I really felt that within Ahsoka, most of those episodes were very self-contained while telling a linear story. This was more serialized and not episodic. We're getting episodic with The Bad Batch. That kind of lends itself more to being, 25-minute episodes. But when you're telling a serialized story with a consistent arc and not an adventure of the week, I think you need to be pushing the time frame a bit, especially, like I mentioned, for the fact that we are going to be visiting a timeline that we've never visited before. So I'd like to be able to default and say that I trust that Lucasfilm will do the right thing, but unfortunately, I've been let down with a couple of these series so far, and Disney just isn't out there producing the type of quality content that they've produced in the past. As always, I would love to know what your thoughts are leading into this. I do have a couple of comments relating to Ahsoka that we'll get you here in just a moment. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address if you'd like to share with me what your thoughts are.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
Star Wars fans rejoice. There is no need to travel to Tatooine to get a hold of a glass of blue milk in time for May the 4th. Starting on April 17th, the iconic beverage will be available for the first time in grocery stores across the country. And if you're asking me, I am absolutely going out and getting myself some blue milk. Star Wars True, T-R-O-Moo, M-O-M-O, True Moo Blue Milk is part of Lucasfilm's Imperial March, a celebration of all things Star Wars in the weeks leading up to the May 4th. They recently had a huge event projecting Star Wars imagery on the Empire State Building in New York City last week. The date, which became an unofficial holiday for fans, May the 4th, is a pun, of course, on the May the Force be with you. The True Moo beverage is described as a vanilla-flavored tinted with blue food coloring. Blue milk made its debut, of course, in the original 1977 Star Wars film. So, listen, this seems cool. They're using imagery from the original trilogy on the cartons of the blue milk, specifically a cartoon image of the fight between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader from The Empire Strikes Back. I've never personally tasted blue milk. This just seems like fun, and typically I don't go out and purchase these types of off-canon products like this, but in this case, I'll make an exception, and I am absolutely going and getting myself some blue milk. Now, speaking of May the 4th, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but The Phantom Menace is returning to the big screen for screenings around the country for its anniversary and the release of May the 4th. And the word is that in select cities around the country, they will be hosting marathons of all 9 films in a row leading up to the May 4th holiday. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to go and check to see if my local theater is going to be also hosting one of these screenings. I will not be sitting for all 9 films in the theater. However, depending on the bargain and the deal they're giving, I would like to go back to the theater to see some of these films. Certainly The Phantom Menace is one that I have slated to go and see on the big screen. I've been wanting to do a rewatch of that as of late anyways. When I saw that they were going to be putting this back on the big screen, I immediately made the decision to not watch it at home and save it for the big screen. I'll be taking my 17-year-old Kyle, who's never seen The Phantom Menace on the big screen. And, Attack of the Clones will be fun to see as well, and the opportunity to go see some of the sequel trilogy films I'd like to go and do too. So, check your local listings if you're interested in it. I cannot be a diehard fan to sit through all 9 films. I'm sure there are those that will. You want to talk about a butt-numb-a-thon? Yeah, that would be an absolute butt-numb-a-thon if you were to go and sit for all 9 of those films. But I'll definitely be going to see, again, The Phantom Menace out on the big screen. All right, so let's get to a bit of The Bad Batch. I'm not going to go through any breakdown of the episodes as of late. Harbinger was the latest episode. Listen, I've been enjoying The Bad Batch. It's always fun to get new Star Wars. I say this every week when it comes to The Bad Batch. Are they delivering us anything unique and special? Not really. The storytelling is good. I thought the last episode was fun. I like to see the return of the Force in my storytelling, especially within The Bad Batch when they're able to go and spike that in. I feel like apart from Ahsoka, that the element of the Force and the Jedi's been missing a lot from the storytelling, and it's one of the reasons why I love Ahsoka so much. To see the return of Asajj Ventress made me actually want more Asajj Ventress in this episode. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get anything sort of definitive in the way of Omega being Force sensitive beyond the commentary of what Asajj has said to her. But overall, I found the episode enjoyable. And seeing her wield the Force and being this ambiguous, not on either side character, I thought was a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed Asajj ever since her first appearance in the Genndy Tartakovsky original 2D animation Clone Wars, which I still absolutely love, even though they're not canon anymore with the regular Clone Wars series that came out. But this was a really fun episode. I continue to hope that we tell the story of, Project Necromancer and whether or not Omega has the midichlorians. I was shocked to see they actually used the word midichlorians in this episode as opposed to just M count. I thought that was something that I certainly was not expecting, but it was a welcome addition to the show for as little as that is. They've typically just been using the term M count, not midichlorians, and I like it when we have new content that goes and points specifically to past content that it can all build upon. And, within the Star Wars fandom, it's almost been taboo to say midichlorians. So it's cool that they actually went and mentioned that. And that there was a conversation from Asajj Ventress talking about how everybody does have midichlorians, but you have to work at going tapping into it, which is something that George had, done all along back in the Phantom Menace, like it or not, that we had kind of moved away from that idea. So I like the fact that they're continuing to sort of reinforce the canon, the way that midichlorians work, how you have to develop those skills. Everybody's got it. Not everybody knows how to use it. I dig that. And it was a nice addition to see that word included in this particular episode. So I've been enjoying The Bad Batch. I don't think it's anything incredibly special in that regard. It's just always fun to get new Star Wars. But what do you think? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Always, I love to hear from you. All right, before we get to my thoughts and review of Godzilla x Kong, let's go ahead and get to just a few of your listener feedback this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Now, to the conversation of Ahsoka, and what did you think? And Blackie wrote, the trailer looks to be more of the same, middle-of-the-road, safe, inclusive, and wokey, brokey, and flat-out lame Disney-fied content. I like Disney for the theme park and for some of what they've done with Star Wars, but for the most part, their output has been pretty lame and forgettable overall. This looks to be more of that. I hope I'm wrong, and that it turns out to be great, but my first impression was pretty meh. DanMcGrath.net writes, the trailer didn't grab me. I'll give it a look when it comes out, but honestly, not expecting much from this one, especially given the other material from the High Republic era and knowing that Kathleen Kennedy was the driving force behind this project. Here's my expectation for the future of Star Wars content. I think that we're seeing a wholesale change in Hollywood relating to, as and Blackie wrote, the wokey content. The content that's more agenda-driven rather than focusing just on plot and good storytelling. There seems to be a catching up of the consumer to those products and a diminishing return that the consumer has been getting that is now resulting in a negative dollars going to these studios. Other studios are completely ignoring injecting this type of content in, or this type of agenda into their content. And Godzilla x Kong is a really good example of this. That being said, I think we can still expect a little of it for the time being until we get a rotation in terms of projects that are being worked on. Now, considering that none of these movies have started yet, I think that there's a good chance that The Mandalorian and Grogu could be a return to some good Star Wars storytelling. I felt that The Rise of Skywalker was solid in that sense. J.J. Abrams doesn't seem to go down that road of agenda, even though publicly he's made statements as such. I didn't feel that apart from a couple of minor things in The Rise of Skywalker that don't bother me at all. I just ignored them. That being said, when you look at something like The Acolyte, this is a show that's been worked on for quite a long time. From an individual who has been very vocal about their own personal political leanings and their objectives in writing the story, so there's a big question mark on it. Same thing rings true for Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy and this post the Rise of Skywalker film with Rey as the potential lead and Daisy Ridley making a return. Now, the fact that a script hasn't been finished yet and it hasn't even, they haven't even announced the full cast, I think there's still hope that this film will get back to just good storytelling and less agenda-driven. But in the meantime, a few of these projects, I think there still is going to be some doubt. The Bad Batch, for instance, has largely avoided all of what I'm talking about, and I'm happy for that. And The Mandalorian, for the most part, did as well. I'm more concerned about, again, what's coming with The Acolyte, so we'll see. As always, talkshownerd@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave your comments, I always love to hear from you every single week.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Now, I only dropped the leaking sounder because I'm going to talk about Godzilla X Kong, and there'll be some spoilers in this in case you're looking to go and see this film. But that being said, you're probably not all that worried about spoilers because you're talking about a movie about giant dinosaurs and big, huge, gigantic monkeys and gorillas going and fighting each other. Godzilla X Kong was a lot of fun. I'm a fan of the current MonsterVerse. I thought that Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla was a lot of fun. I'm with my sons that Godzilla King of the Monsters is probably close to one of the best Godzilla films that I've ever seen. That movie's just a whole heck of a lot of fun. Now, unlike both of my sons, I actually quite enjoyed Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla X Kong kind of continues with that trend, and while there's a part of me that likes Godzilla vs. Kong a little bit better, I really did have a blast watching Godzilla X Kong. The story element of it, the story itself is a little bit thin. The characters in it are a little bit thin, but you're not going to see that with a film like this. You're going to see Godzilla and King Kong and the other kaijus go and battle each other. And in that sense, it absolutely did not disappoint. It really did a very good job of creating some emotional tension between these CGI characters. This is more of a King Kong movie than it is a Godzilla movie. He kind of runs in the background of the film. It is a much different Godzilla than what we typically see in your foreign Godzilla films, or certainly what we saw in Godzilla -1, which was a fantastic movie. This is a giant lizard that moves incredibly fast for being his size. Probably not physically possible whatsoever. The laws of physics are being broken all over the place. That being said, it was a lot of fun. It's got a bit of a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe to it. The human characters go on this adventure down to the Hollow Earth, and the director Wingard includes this 70s soundtrack that really gave it this Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. The film itself has a vibe to it that I really enjoyed. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows what it needs to do, and it executes it. It's also not overly long. We went to go see a 3 o'clock showing. After about 15 minutes, 20 minutes of trailers, the film wrapped up and we were done by before 5:10. And, I like my movies to be 2 hours long, but to push it the way so many films do, they just go on and on and on. This one didn't. The fights were good. They didn't go overly long. And when you get to the finale, you're heading towards the finale, and the finale works because it doesn't go and drag out. You get your battle, you get your kaijus going at it, and you get the resolution. And you know what? You walk out of the movie satisfied and having a good time. It's going to do well in the box office. I really do think that. I think that people are clamoring to go back to the theater. I think a lot of people are getting burned out watching stuff at home. You just don't get the same vibe. And the movie theater really has become the last place, it seems, for the most part, where we're all putting our phones away. And I think that's amazing. I love that fact because it's so easy to just get pulled out of all these shows. And it's hard because so much of the storytelling as of late across multiple genres and platforms has just sucked. But when you still allow yourself to get immersed into good storytelling and you put away the phone and you just get into it, it really still becomes an enjoyable experience. My son Kyle likes to lean over and make little comments to me in the middle of the film, and to which I tell him, listen, You're pulling me out of the movie. I'm having a good time here. Let's not talk. Let's just enjoy it. We'll talk when the movie's over. Just let yourself get into it. The movie experience is so unique and special and almost impossible to duplicate that I hope it never goes away. And it's films like Godzilla X Kong. That's not a masterpiece. It's just a fun popcorn movie. But it reminds you of how much fun movies can actually go and be. I'm not saying run out and see it. If you don't have a huge desire to go see a Godzilla movie, wait until it comes out on streaming. But if you're just looking to go and have a good time and watch Godzilla go and run amok and just cause rampant destruction, that's another part of the fun movie, is that you realize, like, there's a lot of people that are just getting arbitrarily wiped out in this film, and it doesn't seem to give a rip whatsoever. I would definitely go and check it out. I really had a good time. And ultimately, these three films of it kind of makes it a sweet little trilogy. The Gareth Edwards Godzilla movie is kind of set apart on its own in terms of pacing and tone. But when you look at Godzilla King of the Monsters, when you look at Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla X Kong, it actually becomes a nice little trilogy. And a very consistent trilogy at that. And for that, I really dug it and had a great time. For my son Kyle, this is like his Star Wars for him. So he was just over the moon excited for what the movie ended up bringing. So, go and check it out if you're looking for a nice little fun popcorn film to go watch on a weekend or this Easter weekend. All right, listen, before I let you go, a couple of things. I want to remind you again, if you want to support my nerd world, do me a favor. Go and download the Underdog Fantasy app. Even if you just download it to check it out and you just put in the promo code TCNT, that's for my radio show, that'll really go and help me out. But Underdog Fantasy is a fun fan favorite way to go and play fantasy sports. And listen, if you're following the basketball tournaments heading into next weekend and your bracket's already been busted, you can still get in on the action with the Pick'em game, and it's super simple. You actually create your own experience. I do this with my NASCAR drivers. So when I go into the app for Underdog Fantasy, I go into and I click on racing, and it gives me a bunch of drivers to choose from the different series, whether it's Xfinity, F1 as well, or the NASCAR Cup Series. It gives you the drivers and their average finish for that weekend's race. All you have to do is pick whether or not they're going to finish higher or lower than what their average is. And I'll tell you what, I've been winning big time, and I don't even do this stuff regularly. Now, if you're doing it for the tournament, you pick 2 to 5 players and you build up your pick'em entry, and then you just pick higher or lower on all different kinds of stats for that weekend's tournament games. And there's endless projections to choose from. So do me a favor, go and use the app. Again, easy to download, or head on over to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up with the promo code TCNT. And if you put a deposit in as little as $10, Underdog is going to match your first deposit up to $100. You can get matched with as little as $10 starting. And with that, they're also going to give you a mystery special pick to use on your first pick'em entry. So go to Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code TCNT to get that first deposit of $10 or more, up to $100 matched, plus your special pick. It's a fantastic way to go and support the show. I really would appreciate it as well. You got to be 18 or over to play. You got to be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. It'll tell you when you go and download the app. Terms apply, and if you're concerned with your play, go to 1-800-GAMBLER or go to www.ncpgambling.org. And of course, before I let you go, and I'm excited about this, by the way, a lot of promotion for today's show, but I don't know. It's Easter weekend, and you're still listening. So listen, I was really excited because it turns out that the young adult space opera genre has actually been taking off quite a bit as of late. I think it has to do a lot with the popularity of Dune. And when you get into my EMBARK series, really, that first book specifically is a young adult, a teen and young adult space opera adventure. I wrote it for adults, but it is great for ages 11 plus, and the characters are kind of close to that category. So you like science fiction, you listen to the podcast, go and check out my EMBARK Space Opera series. There are 7 books in all in the series, available in ebook, free on Kindle Unlimited if you subscribe to that service, also in hardcover, paperback, and audiobook as well. So go and pick up your preferred copy of the book series today. The description for book 1 is as follows. Katha's father died 1 year ago, and yesterday he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. Since the mysterious passing of her aerospace engineer father, Keith Amaro spent her time at the controls of her ship, preparing to one day leave the world and the past behind. For fellow pilot Taft Guardia, he could only dream of going with her. But interstellar travel isn't what either of them imagined when an industrial accident sets off a global evacuation. As a ruthless corporate madman with a covertly created armada attempts to gain control amid the growing chaos, Keitha receives a cryptic message and discovers what may be the only hope of stopping him. But not all is as it seems, and to save Earth's evacuees, Keitha must unravel her father's secrets and, with the help of Taft and their ragtag crew, confront the enemy before it's too late. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. Again, written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus. Go and buy EMBARK Book 1 today. Go to Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net to pick up your preferred copy. And if you'd like to buy a paperback or hardcover version of any of the 7 books in the series, you can email me directly at TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Again, if you like your science fiction space opera to be epic with some cool technology, romance, and a lot of action, EMBARK is perfect for you on Amazon.com, EMBARK, Jon Justice, or mynerdworld.net. I'm taking a week off of the podcast. I'm heading to Savannah, Georgia for an event. So I hope that you have a fantastic Easter, and I'll be back the following week with the latest Star Wars news. And wherever you are, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're safe. God bless, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.